Hello and welcome to Rights and Recourse, a program that tackles legal issues, bringing you information and analysis. My name is Dumile Mateza. Remember, you can also be part of our discussion today by tweeting us at Rights and Recourse or calling our studio line on 011 714 5497 or 5498. Alternatively, email your thoughts to rightsandrecourse@sabc.co.za. Tomorrow is the 38th anniversary of Black Wednesday, a day on which a host of newspapers, 19 organizations, and scores of apartheid government critics were detained. It always renews the debate around media freedom around the globe. But why is Black Wednesday still significant almost 4 decades later? Well, to discuss the significance of Black Wednesday and issues of transformation and media freedom, we are joined in the studio by veteran journalist Mr. Joe Xolo, who is the Executive Director of the Press Council of South Africa. We would also like to extend a warm welcome to another media veteran, Mr. Dennis Beckett, journalist. And at our Cape Town studio, we are joined by Ms. Zubeida Jeffer, who is also the publisher of The Journalist, a multimedia website founded by the University of Free State. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Good afternoon.
The question, Brother Joe, I would like to ask is, what was Black Wednesday?
Black Wednesday is the day when the World, which was the leading black paper at the time, the Weekend World, and an ecumenical publication called Pro Veritate were banned by the government.
Pro Veritate was the newspaper of the Christian Institute of the late Dr. Beyers-Naudé.
That's it. On the same day, 19 black organizations were banned. These included organizations like the Black People's Convention, the South African Students Organization, the Union of Black Journalists, of which I was president at the time. A whole host of organizations were banned on that day.
Including the Christian Institute.
Including the Christian Institute. And then the editor of The World and his deputy were then hauled off to prison, kept in detention for a number of months.
Dennis, what do you remember about Black Wednesday?
Exactly that so far. We're 100% in harmony. And I remember I was in Umtata at the time. I was with a fellow named Marcus Ngani, who I think you will remember, Joe.
Yes, I remember Marcus.
Yeah, and Marcus and I had a very fine evening at the Holiday Inn in Transkei. And in the morning, all I heard was confusion and we didn't know what was going on. I was scared then that if Transkei was theoretically a separate state, I was scared that when I get back to Joburg, I was going to be arrested. Well, I wasn't.
Working with somebody, you've worked with Percy Kobosa, the late Percy Kobosa. Working with somebody like Percy, what kind of person was Percy?
Percy was a very contradictory personality. On the one hand, he was a brilliant journalist. On the other, he had very strange habits. For example, he belonged to the Progressive Party at the time. He was a member of the Progressive Party. But when he returned from a fellowship at Harvard, he came back, he would become a very radicalized person. So that's how contradictory he was. He opposed the creation of the Union of Black Journalists, but in the end he gave us tremendous support. So he was very contradictory, quite frankly. But he was a brilliant journalist.
I'm told we are joined in Cape Town by Zubeida. Zubeida, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Good afternoon, Dumile. How are you?
Fine, thanks. How are you? What do you remember about Black Wednesday?
Oh, you know, I was still a student then. And I, you know, remember feeling I was a journalism student, and I remember a sense of real horror when the news came through, because it was, you know, we were very familiar with the Black Consciousness Movement and all the organizations of that time. And also, of course, with Percy Kobosa. I didn't know him personally at that stage, but it was like as if a black cloud descended upon all of us. You know, it was as if a tight grip, you know, crossed one's one's brain, you know, as if your head was being held in a vice. That's how I remember. I remember experiencing it very physically, you know. So it's something that has been with me, has stayed with me always.
But Joe, what happens when, probably Gilberto can also come into this, and Dennis, what happens when an editor walks through the newsroom and tells the journalists, I'm sorry, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, we have been banned?
It didn't happen to me on that day because I was already in jail when it happened. But it did happen a few months later, I mean a few years later, when Post Transvaal was shut down. And we had to very quickly revive the Sowetan from being a knock and drop sheet to being a daily publication. It was the excitement of creating a new publication, but at the same time, the sadness that a publication that we've worked for so long is now dying, just because somebody in Pretoria decides it must die.
Zubeida, what happens in that case? I don't know whether you have been in that situation where an editor walks through the door and tells the journalist, I'm sorry, this newspaper has been banned.
I wasn't really in that situation, but I did experience a situation where the editions were banned, or or journalists were banned or detained. You know, that I experienced very sort of directly. And often when I listen to people now and they complain about press freedom, whatever, then I wonder if they have any sense that, you know, we're living in a life and death situation. We were, you know, it was a very, very different time where we had no way of expressing ourselves, and we knew that if we just said too much, then there would be a clampdown.
Well, when we come back, we will be talking about what was happening. Probably I should ask that question now. We have a few minutes. Dennis, we all know that the Rand Daily Mail was seen as the paper in those days, and we know it was not affected by this ban. What was happening in the Rand Daily Mail?
Well, I wasn't at the Rand Daily Mail in those days. I was at the World, and so I was much more conscious of what was happening at the World. But the Rand Daily Mail, look, there was certainly, I can tell you, there was a lot of rivalry between the World and the Rand Daily Mail, particularly on a Saturday. Well, at least from my perspective, particularly as a Saturday, I was responsible for the Saturday paper. And there were quite a lot of fights on the go in that respect. And
I probably should have asked that question differently. I should have asked that question, what was going on in the minds of white journalists when this crackdown happened with black journalists?
I should think pretty much the same as was going on in the minds of black journalists, namely, it was, when you say, what does it feel like when the newspaper, when the editor walks through, I had that experience later as well. But on the 19th of October, I think everybody was shocked, everybody was frightened, everybody thought, what happens now, where do we go from here? It was a very heavily jolting thing. There had been many jolts, but this jolt was a big jolt.
Well, when we come back, we will be talking further about press freedom and Black Wednesday. If you'd like to join us in today's discussion, please call us on 011 714 5497 or 5498, or tweet us at Recourse, or email your thoughts about this subject and many other subjects on rights@recourse@sabc.co.za. Stay with us.
Preparing for victory requires intense effort and teamwork. When you get to it, there is no turning back, because all eyes are on you. When it's action time, nothing should stand in your way. Sports Live tackles and analyzes all the sport action. This is the home of all your sport news, updates, and more. Sports Live, weekdays at 8:30 p.m.
Welcome back. Aubrey Sawsons of the Nieman Fellow, who won the Nieman Fellowship in 1961, had this to say about Percy Koboza. We chose Percy as because he made a significant breakthrough. Not only was his academic record impeccable, but his easygoing personality, his integrity, and above all, his sense of humor won the day. Did it come across, Dennis, as that personality?
That certainly sounds right, absolutely right. Percy, his laconic, low-key wit, his permanent cigarette hanging out of his mouth. You couldn't do it these days. I mean, that was then.
Permanent cigarette.
And he could be very funny indeed. There was an event 2 weeks before the October the 19th. On a Friday afternoon, Percy was summoned, unbeknown to me, to the Prime Minister's office. And I was putting the Saturday paper together. And Percy we'd had a bit of an argument. We'd had frequent arguments, I might tell you. And Percy had reprimanded me for not being ferocious enough in the leaders, the editorial articles. So I thought, right, Percy, I'll make you really happy. And so I had a fierce editorial article. And it's like 5 o'clock. We've sent the copies of The World out across the world. They've been printed. They've gone in trucks, spreading through what was then Transvaal. When Percy gets home from John Forster, and he's quite like ashen, and he says, what's in tomorrow's paper? So I say, well, you've got a really fierce editorial. He says, no, we don't want it.
It's gone already.
We couldn't pull them all back. So then Percy thinks for a minute, and he says, I don't think we'll see each other again. So I say, why is that? He says, I'm sure they put us in segregated jail cells. He was right, of course, they would have. But we weren't.
What does Black Wednesday invoke to you, Brajo? I know you say you were already in jail by the time.
For me, it reminds me about a place we shouldn't go back to under any circumstances. So that on this day, in fact, it's a recommitment to freedom of expression and freedom of the press. I've got to commit myself to that, continue fighting. We might have a constitution that guarantees freedom of expression, but that right needs to be guarded very fiercely.
I want to go back, down to Zubaydah in Cape Town, but I want to ask this question. With your work as formerly the Ombudsman and now working in the press council offices, do you have any relationship with people across Africa and what they are doing to fight for press freedom?
In fact, I speak at conferences, etc. People who are trying to create their own press councils will invite me to come and speak to them, whether it's Zambia or Kenya or wherever up north, Rwanda. So I go there constantly and I see how they are struggling with the concept of freedom of expression.
I just want to go down to Zubaydah. Zubaydah, I want to come back to you. I'm not sure what to refer to you as, whether I should refer to you as a journalist, as a social activist, an author, an academic, or a pioneer. Probably you can tell us, especially the work you're doing down at the University of the Free State.
Really all of the above. I never know what to say. But in the end, I suppose I'm a journalist and a writer and an activist.
The work you're doing down at the University of the Free State?
Yes, I'm the publisher of the Journalist multimedia website, and essentially telling the stories of the great pioneers of journalism in South Africa, starting from the 1800s. And we are working closely with the different university departments, journalism departments, and slowly getting them on board to build all these stories into their curriculum. It's quite a process. We also have made contact and had discussions with the All Africa Editors Forum, and they have come on board and they are identifying universities in different countries who will help to write the stories of the pioneers in their countries. So the idea is that we all together will create a sense of what our story really is. and that it starts way before 1652 and colonialism. We've had communication, you know, for centuries, and then look at sort of the early pioneers that have moved from storytelling, oral storytelling, to the written word, and take it right through. And so we're very, very excited because, you know, we need to shape our own story, and we need to see ourselves. We cannot see Britain and the Netherlands, and we can't see that. We have to see ourselves. And I feel that the students deserve that. And they're being really, really treated or getting a bad deal by not getting the real stories.
Well, Zubaydah touched there on transformation, and we are going to discuss transformation as we go along. We continue our discussion, and if you'd like to join us, you can call us on 011 714 5497 or 5498, or tweet us at Rights on Recourse. Our email address is rightsonrecourse@sabc.co.za. Stay with us.
In Africa, mobile devices are tools to make payments, browse the internet, and keep governments in check with social media forums.
It's given an average African too much power in their hands.
And tech creativity is solving some of the continent's problems.
Everything is internet-driven.
And on Network, we tell you how Africans are using technology and social media in their everyday lives.
Join Siphumelele Zondi on Network every Sunday at 19:30 CAT.
Welcome back, and let us hear what the Twitter community has to say before we continue our discussion. Let's hear what they're saying. Themba Protocol, a very well-known writer, says one of the biggest challenges in the adversarial is the adversarial role other media houses have assumed. We'll talk about that. He's repeated that. And Jackson Silela says Percy Koboza was a fighter, a voice for the voiceless. Terry Gold says the state wants the press to inform the people only on limited info. They steal money and go home, and with salaries of 1.5 million a month, really. So we'll discuss some of the things Themba Protocol is talking to us about. Probably let's go there immediately. Themba Protocol says one of the biggest challenges is the adversarial role played by media houses. Is there an adversarial role? I think this is the same kind of idea the National Party had of the Daily Mail.
Yeah. Who are you asking? You're looking at me.
I'm looking at you,
Joe's got a
Dennis.
nice point on the question of the relationship between the past and the present. I would say that in those days the government objected to the media houses for having alleged hidden agendas. These days the government again objects to the media houses for having alleged hidden agendas. I don't see really much hidden agenda. None of the media houses are playing to any gallery other than the one that they say they are. Whether this is adversarial or not is the use of the word, actually. Certainly, media houses will have assumptions, approaches, and some brand of editorial policy. I don't think anybody says our editorial policy is to oppose the government. They leave it to the journalists' and editors' discretion and conscience and judgment.
Joe?
As Dennis says, it depends on what you mean by adversarial. If you mean that the media are questioning what government is doing, that we believe is the traditional role throughout history, that the media will always question what government is doing, what any person in authority is doing. And in that way, they will be seen as adversarial, but essentially they want to bring out news about corruption, about the misuse of power. That's the role of the media. Whether it's in Britain, in the States, in Australia, it's exactly the same thing. And now, people politicians are very sensitive. Once they see somebody scraping around them, they think that this person is taking the role of the opposition parties, which are too weak to fight, which is absolute nonsense.
Yeah, I second everything that Joe said, I might say.
I want to go back to something. Zubeida, I'll come back to you too. I went and I pulled out the 1992 ANC document, Ready to Govern. They say the ANC assess that mere declaration of media freedoms on their own are not enough. Therefore, there must be, these freedoms must be underpinned by an equitable distribution of media resources, development programs, and a deliberate effort to engender a culture of open debate. Are we there? Are we there yet? Are we having open debate, Zubeida?
I do think we're having open debate, although I do think that with certain discussions, it's taking place within a very limited audience. If you look at sometimes the issues that are raised or are being debated in the newspapers, then one could safely say that this is not what's the dominant issue in the country, and this is not what is on people's minds. But that's not always the case also. So I do think we have a deeper situation than we had before, because we have more than 100 community radio stations. We've got even now 5 regional TV stations. We've got, we've got lots of levels, many more levels of depth in terms of media reach. And that is very, very satisfying. And if you turn on a radio station anywhere in the country, you can hear the most outrageous things being said. I mean, some foreign visitors say to me they would never hear this sort of thing, on their television, on their radio stations. So I'm very proud of us that we're able to shout and scream and make a noise, and that we are really, able to say in many cases what we really think.
Taking from what Zubeida is saying, that we do have an open debate, this open debate can be in many forms. Are we screaming past each other, or don't we understand each other?
In fact, screaming past each other is part of democracy. The louder the screaming, the better. The only problem that we have is that some voices are not visible enough, or are not heard loudly enough, because they might be in the rural areas, they might be in the poorer areas, and obviously because the media are designed to make money, they will concentrate on those who can pay for the newspapers, for the TV licenses, etc. That's the limitation that we have. Now, the irony is that so many black groups have been entrusted with shares in the media, and they abandon those shares after a year or two simply because they believe there isn't enough money to be made in the media. So they'd rather go into mining or into whatever else they do. So that once we start screaming and saying transformation is not happening, and we don't examine what we ourselves are doing, what government is doing to enlarge the media pool, we are going to run into serious problems.
Dennis, I think the two other speakers, Parajo and Zubeida down in Cape Town, has gone into this field of transformation. What do we understand about transformation of the media? Do we understand replacing a white man with a black man?
The original idea of transformation was to do things better. And it's, I think, to my mind, become corrupted and distorted into the idea that you replace a white man with a black man. That isn't really the idea. It's a new racism. It certainly wasn't the original idea. So that's gone there.
There are many people who are going to disagree with you when you say it's racism.
If you divide the world into racial categories, that's racist. It doesn't matter what your intentions are. A scientist interested in science worries about science. A dentist worries about dentures. A racist worries about race.
The other thing that I want to go to is there were various good black journalists in the past. I'm reminded here of Henry Nxumalo, who did that beautiful story of the potato farm where people were being made to work. I think it was prisoners who were being made to work without pay on a farm, and he pretended to be a worker and went to work there and came out with a beautiful story for the Drum.
Yep, Henry did a few very interesting exposés during that period at Drum. And as I say, it was good journalism. And I see some journalists are emulating what he used to do. For example, a person pretending to be a domestic servant and getting to work. I've seen copies of that type of writing. It was fantastic journalism at the time. But getting to the potato boycott, I mean, what his articles did is they led to the potato boycott of the 1950s. Which says that, in fact, journalism does have an impact on society.
Do we have that kind of writing today, Zubeida, that Henry Nxumalo, a person like Henry Nxumalo, came up with, where he actually, at great risk, went and pretended to be an employee who was looking for a job, and he was employed, and he was writing a story all the time?
You know, it's a different time now, and I do believe we have some really great pieces of journalism. I've been involved in the various journalism competitions as a judge, and there are really, really great pieces of journalism. But we can't assess it in the same way as we assess the coverage of the 50s, nor the coverage of the 60s or the 80s. The time was very different, the stories were very different. And so now the challenges are different too. And the question is, how do journalists understand the challenge that we are confronted with, and what are the central issues that inform their focus? And I'm not always very happy with that. I'm always very happy with the fact that you know, there isn't focus on you know, some of the things that really need focus on.
Brajo, we have noticed the threat of the Media Appeals Tribunal the ruling party has been talking about. And I understand they did say in the past they're going to take it to Parliament, and Parliament must then deliberate over it before it's set up. Isn't that a form of, that does not actually stop people from saying you cannot publish this and that, because people are saying the media is always negative, sees the negative things from the ruling party or the government?
Okay, can I contribute to what Zubeida was saying? Yes, it's different times, different conditions, but the investigative spirit in journalism is still alive. As Zubeida says, once you are a judge in one of these competitions and you look at the range of submissions from various candidates, then you realize that we still have outstanding journalism in this country. What it takes, the courage it takes to go and dig up what people don't want dug up, they still have the courage to go and publish that material. We still have that type of journalism. And that's why there is discomfort in certain circles, because the investigative journalism is, in fact, excellent.
I've noticed recently, I know I've asked a question which we are going to come to later, but I've noticed, talking about investigative journalists, I've noticed what the Mail and Guardian is doing in this respect. For instance, they've set up a certain group called Amabungane, who does, some of these investigative journalists are funded separately. Why?
Investigative journalism is very expensive. And a small publication like the Mail and Guardian doesn't have the resources to fund an investigative unit. But you get to the Sunday Times and you see they've got an investigative unit that they fund themselves. Same thing with City Press, Media 24, they all have investigative units. So the model at the Mail and Guardian is different, simply because they needed the funding the resources to fund that investigative unit. So what they do is they get donations from various journalism institutions around the world to contribute towards that unit.
Probably just go back to my other question. Dennis, I think you can come in here if you so wish. The question is, I see the Media Appeals Tribunal is back on the radar and it's going to Parliament now.
The Media Appeals Tribunal was first mooted in 2007. And since then, the Press Council has been saying to the ANC, there are several things that you need to clarify about what you are looking for. First, you need to tell us how you foresee an effective regulatory system, because you are alleging that our system is not effective. What measures do you use? The second thing is, what is the nature of this Media Appeals Tribunal? It's never been defined right up to now. After the Mangaung conference, they then resolved that they were going to give it to Parliament, and Parliament was going to investigate all forms of regulation, and Parliament would then recommend a system for the country. From the Mangaung conference, I was in touch with the chairperson of the portfolio committee, asking him, when is the hearing, when is the hearing? Because after the Mangaung conference, we welcomed the fact that there was going to be an open hearing. We go to this NGC, and the same resolution comes back with the same flawed arguments that the current system is ineffective. But we don't even know how.
Self-regulation.
Yeah, the system that we have, we don't even know how they see it as ineffective. By the standards that we use, it is a very effective system. The Appeals Tribunal will have to impose a code of conduct on the media. And once you impose a code of conduct from outside the newsroom, you are in breach of the Constitution. Nobody can walk into the newsroom and tell the editor what to publish or what not to publish. That's why freedom of expression and freedom of the media is guaranteed in the Constitution.
Talking about that, Zubeida, I'm coming back to you. The question is whether, Dennis, you can come in. I'll expect two of you to talk to me about this. Whether the Appeals Tribunal is necessary, but can it not be done by one of the Chapter 9 institutions rather than being done by Parliament?
Well, Zubeida, if I may just put in a word.
Sure.
I see to everything that Joe said here, he knows a million times more about this stuff than I do. To me, there's a certain basis to this. There's always going to be government chasing, and particularly in troubled societies, you're going to be chasing the press and trying to tell them to simmer down. And the press is always going to be resisting, and bit by bit by bit, the press will always win. It won't be that there can be big dips on the way, but bit by bit, freedom grows. So that's my simple contribution. Zubeida, sorry.
Zubeida?
Yeah, I don't support the idea of a media tribunal. Yes, it can be imposed if that's decided, but that isn't going to be the healthiest way for us to build and develop our profession and the industry. It has to be, we have to engage and we have to consider from within how we want to regulate, how we want to do things. So if it's just an external force, then I think that's going to be very damaging. And, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that we mustn't all sit down again, which I don't know why we have to do it every time, but we must sit down again and talk through the issues, you know, if there is general dissatisfaction. And it's going to be interesting to watch, you know, I watch very closely the British Commission that was held recently, where all these same issues were raised about the media's conduct. So we must be prepared to face the, you know, the criticism, but the government must also realize that we all know that for the next 2 to 3 years we're facing a difficult situation. Economics is bad. It's not going to get better, at least for 2 to 3 years. And to, turn up the screws in a hostile way on the media just adds to the tension that's already there naturally in the industry. So the government also has to ask itself, how does it engage? How should we all engage? Do we up the ante and do we all start fighting? Or do we sit down and say, okay, we are in a difficult position, we don't like what you're doing, or you don't like what we're doing, and then from there, take it from there. But it's not going to help us if there's going to be a big war. You will have war between the media, the journalists and the government. Then you'll have war between the students and the vice chancellors and the education department. Then you'll have war between the workers and the employers. I mean, we have to bring the levels of tension down.
Well, we'll come back to these issues. If you'd like to join us on today's discussion, you can call us on 011 714 5497 or 5498 or tweet us at Recourse. Stay with us.
SABC brings to you Rugby World Cup 2015. Let's do this.
Morning Live sets the agenda for the day.
We bring you the latest local and international news.
We are on the ball with all your sports activities and results.
We give you the latest business update.
We bring you the latest weather every time.
Watch Morning Live every weekday morning at 6 o'clock, bringing you everything you need to know before you go. Shap shap, tada.
SABC brings to you Rugby World Cup 2015. Let's do this.
Welcome back to Rights and Recourse. We are discussing media freedom in line of Black Wednesday, 38 years ago, when all the newspapers, the World and the Weekend World, were banned. But, Brajo, there's always been this question. I read an article this morning by Themba Sopotokele saying that the levels of training in the newsroom have gone down, the levels of reporting have gone down. Is that the case?
I wouldn't say that. Let me paint a picture here. In all of 2014, we in the Press Council got 461 complaints. Now, for me, 461 complaints is much, much too many. But I have to wear another hat and say 461 complaints against the backdrop of the millions of words that journalists churn out daily. That's a drop in the ocean. If you just sit by yourself and think of all the things you know about the world, about South Africa, about everything else, you got them from radio, from television, from the press, whether it's magazines or newspapers, so that the media are still doing what they have been traditionally doing, giving information to the people, to their readers and to their viewers and listeners. We have a habit of saying it used to be fine in the good old days. But there are a couple of things that we need to concede, that there are problems in the newsrooms. For example, some time back, SANEF did a survey in the newsrooms, all journalists from the age of, 1 year to 5 years in practice. And they found that these guys, after having been through university, etc., their standards were hopeless, quite frankly. That report is still on the SANEF website. At that time, a meeting was called of all the training institutions in the country. And we said, here are our findings, what do we do about this? And the tertiary institutions all said, you should look at the quality of students we receive from the high schools. High symbols, but they come in there, they can hardly put two words together to string a sentence. So we are doing the best out of this bad material we have. And at the time, SANEF sent a delegation to the Minister of Education, and we said, we've had this colloquium, and these are the outcomes, and the blame is being put on the education system. And the minister turned to us and said, chaps, you don't expect us to change 300 years of oppression with the wave of a wind. So it's a whole systematic thing that's permeating all society. And it is very easy for people to then point at one industry or the other. That problem is general throughout the country, that we have serious problems with standards.
Zubeida, you are in that space down at the University of the Free State. Is that what you are picking up?
I think that we need to, sort of support the students much more. My sense is not that they're hopeless. I think that they are in need of very specific kind of writing support about how to write. And I found that with a little bit of more attention, a little bit of care, we publish a lot of these stories on the Journalist. We only publish it when they've rewritten it a few times, and it's of a very high quality. So we work together with them. And I find with the proper supervision, they do get it. And I think that we will have to look at different ways in which to do that, where we don't have the capacity to do this on a large scale at the University of the Free State, for example, but we are very committed to thinking of how we can. Do we have a mentor system? Do we put 5 students with one mentor for a year, even if they just liaise over the internet? But there are all sorts of things we can do. There are all sorts of people who write well who will be happy to do it. But we need to think differently, because I'm amazed by the students. I'm amazed by their passion and their keenness. But they do lag in the sense that they are not given, they're not able to cross that last bridge of matching some of the things they've learnt and then connecting that with the skill of writing, you could say journalese. Those two things are not coming together because universities, they write in a very academic way.
Let's hear from Dennis. Dennis, I want you to I'm going to ask you another question after that, but we can
Well,
continue.
let me just say, number one, I've been in journalism in one way and another longer than the average South African has been alive, quite a lot longer than that. And there's never been a time that I have not seen new people coming in, and for that matter, old people already there who are producing terrible stuff. I'm thinking now of people who are giving me manuscripts and unedited copy and so forth. There's never been a time that I haven't seen terrible stuff, and there's never been a time that I haven't seen some people doing stuff that makes me really excited, and I think this is wonderful where we're going. Point number 2, I want to say that in no industry more than this industry does the tendency come forth for those who are of greyer years to say, it was so much better in the old days. It's always been there. That was there when I began, and it's there now, and it's going to be long after we've gone.
The newspapers used to have cadets. I know the independent newspapers have a cadet school. They still have the cadet school?
Some of them do exist, but they are limping along. For example, the New Age have a system where they get new intakes of about 10, 20 every 6 months or so. So that one is still functioning. We have the Media 24 one, which has been reshaped. It's no longer the same way as it used to be. the independent one has sort of been toned down, if you might call it that. So there is still some form of training inside the publications, but the expectations are that if somebody comes from a university with a journalism degree, that person should be ready,
to go into the job. And
now, the other problem that we have is that we have a huge gap in the middle levels of publications. 1 to 5 years, 6 years, you find quite a number of new people coming in. But once somebody has a line in his CV that says worked for the Star for 5 years, that person becomes attractive to government as well as to business, and so they get slipped away. So the old fuddy-duddies like Dennis and me will remain there, and then we've got a whole lot of youngsters at the bottom. Now, from about 8 in the morning, you are looking at copy, you are assisting the journalist to try and improve his copy. By 11 o'clock, you are exhausted, and from there, stuff just goes through because you're exhausted.
we should get exhausted, isn't it?
I'd last have something. I'd last have something that I slightly disagree with Joe on. I just want to say, Joe, that the thing about damn, go on, and it's coming back to me.
I can understand.
I'm just distracted by the holding.
Yeah. I think what you were saying, we shouldn't be getting frustrated. We shouldn't get tired of going through the copy all the time. But time is going up because there are deadlines.
Dumile?
Yes, Zubaida, I'm talking to you.
I want to take the discussion in a different direction.
You should hold that thought. When we come back from the break, I'll come to you so that you can give us what you would think about. If you'd like to join us still, you can still call us on 011-714-5497 or 5498 at Rise Recourse. We're still talking media freedom and Black Wednesday. When we come back also, we'll try and find out what is happening to celebrate, commemorate Black Wednesday. I seem to remember there was a Percy Koboza Memorial Lecture. I don't know whether there is a Percy Koboza Memorial Lecture this year. We'll find out from Brajao. Don't go away. We'll be back right after this.
SABC brings to you Rugby World Cup 2015.
We ask tough questions.
Have you spoken to the president about resigning?
We ask hard questions.
What you're trying to do requires a lot of money and you don't have money.
We ask quick questions.
A quick one. You are aware that the PAC has now been banned by the IEC?
I'm aware.
And you are also aware that it has been banned because of you?
We ask good questions.
Are you an infiltrated organization?
We also ask funny questions.
Is it safe to eat your chicken?
All the questions, all the time, right here on Question Time, Monday to Thursday at 5:30 p.m.
Welcome back. We're still discussing the media freedom and Black Wednesday. I wanted to know, I think Dennis has now remembered what he wanted to say earlier before we went to the break.
Yes, thank you. The point is, Joe is saying that we're losing these middle rank guys because they're being lured away by the better money of public relations, government or private. Now, to me, an important thing, a real thing to me, is I think that these are two different activities. Journalism is... A journalist gets into it because that journalist wants to find the truth for themselves, his or herself. You go into media because you want to get you go into public relations because you want to get a nice, secure salary. There are many people that, in my mind, stay in journalism for what I believe to be the right reasons to be in journalism. You want the truth. That's why you want that. When I was employing people, my primary concern is this guy passionate about telling the true tale of something that happened, or is he merely there to be able to, thinking that he will process press releases? To me, they're different industries, and I'm glad, Joe, that we still have some guys, even not of our venerable years, who stick to that belief.
Zubaida, you wanted to say something earlier when I cut you short. Can you continue?
I think I can pick up from what Dennis said, that you know, journalism, whether we like it or not, it's a calling. I mean, it's like teaching.
It cannot be for somebody who's looking for a job.
The companies get away with murder because they know we're passionate about what we do. So, and we feel very strongly about what we do. We still have those journalists around. But what was very concerning and what we're looking at very closely at the journalist is presently one of the biggest challenges in the country is inequality, economic inequality. And we're looking at our media companies. If you look at the biggest company, Naspers, not only did it kind of benefit under apartheid, it now has benefit under democracy. We fought hard to open up our country, many of us, thousands of us. And so Naspers benefits from this. They are able to do business in China. They're able to do business all over the show, not by their own clever abilities, but because all the people of South Africa opened the doors for them to do business. So the CEO becomes very rich. He's now worth 2.5 billion. And at the same time, the journalists are retrenched. And you know what appalled me very much is when journalists from the Natal Witness called me and said that Naspers Media 24 bought over the family business, and they stopped the staff getting coffee and tea, free coffee and tea. Now, the thing is, we have to look at this. We've got to say, what is happening to the quality of the workplace? Yes, we're passionate, yes, we're dedicated, but we want to see 10 years from now that our journalists work under good conditions, not that the CEOs of the companies walk away with millions. That the journalists are given a good deal.
What Zubaida is raising is very important. I think we'll get some time or another to discuss transformation, which we have not been able to discuss here. But what I wanted to know, now that we are going towards the end of the program, what is happening around Black Wednesday? What are we doing? There used to be a Percy Koboza memorial lecture. Do we still have this Percy Koboza memorial lecture?
Yes, we do have the Percy Koboza Memorial Lecture, which happens to coincide with
Let's first take this call quickly from Albertina from Orange Farm. Albertina, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Good afternoon, sir. I always buy newspaper or look at the covers of newspapers. What I've realized is that our media doesn't always tell the truth. You find that one story would tell the truth. The only thing that they do is always apologize to people for saying incorrect stuff. And then when they apologize, they go and write a small piece on the 6th or 8th page. And then our media, compared to international media, they're very negative about our country. We nearly lost the World Cup because our media doesn't support what the good is done in South Africa. They always are negative and they don't tell the truth.
Thank you, Albertina. Let's just stick to that. I wanted to hone into that. I think what Albertina is saying there is saying media must be patriotic. Is that the role of the media, to be patriotic? I watch rugby and I don't support the Springboks.
I think she's saying a number of things, but the most important one for me is the fact that she says publications will write an offensive piece on the front page and then hide the apology inside. That is not true.
I've seen that change too, yes.
What has happened is that since I became press ombudsman, which was in 2007, we have always tried to match the apology to the offense. The more serious the offense, the more prominent the apology. The most recent one, which was most glaring, was when we ordered the Sunday Times to put a a poster apologizing to Ronnie Castles. So that this narrative that, in fact, we hide apologies inside is not true.
But should journalists be patriotic?
Research has, in fact, proved that that story is not true.
Should journalists be patriotic?
There's nothing more patriotic than having the courage and determination to raise thorny issues, to look under the stones, That's patriotic. People who want praise songs shouldn't be looking to real journalism for that. They should be looking for the sponsored publications of the institutions that wish to issue their own praise songs. Journalists should be looking for truth in all its guises, the plus and the minus.
Dan, Zubaydah, I think you have a view on that too. Should journalists be patriotic?
Well, I think most of us are patriotic. We're very proud of the country. From what I see, many of the people I talk to, we're proud of South Africa. We're proud of being South African. So I don't think that's, should be under discussion. I think that's a given. But we differ in different publications and different stations about how we understand that, yes. We differ about that. And perhaps there could be more of a discussion about that. But
Zubaydah, unfortunately, we had a wonderful, this looks like a fire tales discussion that we had here. Not wonderful discussion. We still have a lot of things that we didn't cover, like transformation in its depth and all of what we mean by diversity and all of those things. But next time we will call you guys back again. We'll have another discussion on this. And I would like to close with a quote from a German pastor, Martin Niemöller. I quote, "First they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. They came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. They came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for me, and there was no one to speak for me." Close quote. This has been Rights and Recourse. This program is repeated at 5 on Monday morning. Do find us on Twitter and on YouTube. Thank you to our guests, and good afternoon.